everybody. This is Jess from 3D Learning Experts, and you're listening to the LD Experts Podcast, the show for busy parents who want to help their kids with learning disabilities, or as I like to say, learning differences, go from surviving to thriving. It is so exciting to have an expert from 3D Learning Experts here today. So thank you for agreeing to this interview, Rachel.
Well, thank you for having me today. I'm really excited.
Yay, awesome. So parents often ask for guidance on how their child struggling with math can succeed or understand math or what to do with their child. And since you are an amazing math instructor, I thought it would be perfect to have you share some insight for parents of children who struggle with math due to learning challenges.
I'd love to help in any way, shape, or form. I know that a lot of parents have trouble even knowing where to start with their students with math. So even having that little bit of guidance on what to do, where to start, where to get help, or how to find help, I think will help with parents everywhere.
Awesome. Well, we are on the same page. So let's get started with talking about you. What sparked your passion about math?
I actually have always loved math since I was little. I don't know what it was. It made sense to me, which is not the same for every person. Every person has their strengths and weaknesses when it comes to all areas of life. I just have always been drawn to math because that's kind of how my brain personally works. I love finding different ways to solve the same problems. And I think that's where math really works for me. I can see the problem 2 to 3 different ways to solve it. When I was younger, I was always in the accelerated math programs, but I didn't always succeed right away. I did still have some challenges working through the problems, but I always loved doing it. When I got to college, I really focused on my psych degree, but I worked a lot in psych statistics and psych math. So that's kind of where my love for the extended areas of math grew, was there.
That's so interesting. It's funny because my youngest son is taking a culinary math class right now in college, and fractions, decimals, and percentages have always been the hardest for me. I did pretty well with math except for those. And that is basically what his math is about, is figuring out, fractions and decimals. And so I told him right when we started, because it's an online math, so the plan was we were going to watch all the training together so I could help him. But I said, if it's too hard for me, we're going to just have Rachel help you and get you through. But I'm so happy to say he's actually doing most of it himself. But wow, that you really enjoyed statistics. And as I have tried to hire additional math teachers over the years, I have really not been successful in that area because most math teachers are very boring and they don't know how to engage their students. But you are not at all a boring math teacher. All of your students love you and they leave tutoring with you with a confidence and knowledge that is just amazing. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in the future. So what's your best memory of math as a child or a youngster or in college?
Oh, this is a hard one. But I specifically remember this math class in it was 3rd or 4th grade, somewhere around there. And it was all about shapes, but how different shapes fit in together and what kind of lines are used to make certain shapes. And I remember it really being hands-on. We would take different things and build towers. We would test strengths of different things. And I kind of like to weave that in when I'm teaching math. I love to show them how they could use that math that they're doing right now. And so I think that's where I got that from. I love to show them how they could measure something on a wall and use their fractions to help them do that. Or I have them look at recipes together and we see how those recipes fit together. So I really love the way that I was taught that in that grade. And I try to integrate it with what I do with my students as well.
You are so right about the importance of being able to see math come to life. Like I said, I didn't do well with fractions. I didn't understand fractions at all growing up. And it wasn't until I started homeschooling and my son, my first child that I was homeschooling, was learning fractions, and he was watching a video and it showed pieces and how things were fractions. And I was 40 years old, and it was the first time in my life I understood fractions, because I could actually see what, why 1/4 and 2/8 were the same thing. I never could comprehend that before then.
Oh, for sure. I love the idea of cutting a sandwich. I use this with all my students with fractions. Like, I can cut a sandwich in half, and I can leave that one half there, and I can take the other half and I can cut it into fourth. I have the same amount of sandwich in those 2/4 as I do in my half over here, but then being able to see it, and like, a lot of kids have sandwiches. They're like, I could cut my sandwich into so many different pieces. It's something that they actually can see later on that day or that week, and they can still think back to that math lesson. So I love that idea of relating things to real world things that the child's going to see.
That's awesome. All right. So now I would like to start talking about what you do with your students. And you already started sharing some of those things. So I don't even know if you can elaborate on this question, but how do you approach tutoring students who find math challenging and intimidating?
So I like to break it down into pieces. I always say that math is just learning those 4 basic things: adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, and applying them to other areas. So if we can take it all the way back to the beginning, see those individual pieces for what they are, and make sure that they are solidified and people know what they're doing, they feel confident in those small areas, they can much more easily translate into those areas that they're having more difficulty with. I also love to take everything multisensory: pictures, drawing. If I can have the student draw a picture, or we pull up different things and move things around, and I have them look at the wall, see what shapes they see them adding different pieces together that they can visualize in front of them, I think that helps the student remember and relate it to other areas in life. Just really breaking it down to those basics at first, getting those perfect before moving on, I think is the best way that they can succeed in other areas in math as well.
And do you find it any different or more challenging now that you are working with students exclusively online versus when you were in front of them, next to them at a desk?
Originally, yes, because I had to adapt the way I was thinking. It wasn't that it was the students had any more difficulty learning. It was me personally having to adapt what I did in person to what I do online. But now I don't find it any more challenging than I did before, because I've created systems of what I can use online. If I can find pretty much anything through a Google search, and I can somehow fit that in. If I need to use a protractor, I'll just put a protractor directly in to our math lesson. I can still show them how to use it. I can draw pictures. I can download things. I can make things where we move tiles around just like we would on a desk. I can still do that online. It just took a little bit of extra work behind the scenes to get it to work on screen.
Thank you for explaining that. What do you believe are the key elements of making math accessible and enjoyable for students?
I think the main idea is I've got to get to know the student, to know what their interests are. Because for every student, they're going to be more interested in one thing than another, right? And I need to figure out what that student likes to do. If they like pictures, if they like drawing, we lean more towards that. I like to adapt it to each student. If they love drawing, we lean more towards that side, because if they love to do something, they're more likely to understand and remember it as well. If they love moving different tiles around and creating things that way, I use that more for that student. Some students do really well with specific tools like a touch point math tool. And so I can integrate that not only in addition and subtraction, but also multiplication and division and fractions. So I just like to manipulate things that work well with that student into other areas of math as well.
Can you share a success story of a student you've worked with who initially struggled with math and then showed significant improvement?
Yes. So I have had a student for many years now, and we started at the very, very beginning. We down to adding simple things like 1 + 4 or 2 + 5. And I have seen this student grow so much. We are now working on some geometry topics together. And child is really into building things. So with our geometry topics, we are talking a lot about the angles of which a screw has to go into a piece of wood, or how to get a perfect 90-degree angle. Still doing all of the topics that he needs to work on, but doing it in a way that he can remember, like, oh, when I go and build that table, I know that the angle has to be just right, or I need that perfect square on the side, or just relating it back to things he really likes. But he's had so much success. I am just so proud and so happy that he has made this success over these few years.
And if I think I know which student you're talking about, and this student's mother is a teacher.
Correct.
But she was unable to successfully help her son learn how to do math. What do you think you've done that made the big difference in his life?
I think the main thing was, I think this goes back to something I said earlier, was when he was trying to do math and she was helping him with the math, she was helping him at the grade that he was currently in. So trying to start at that point, you miss the stuff at the beginning that you need to build that foundation on. So I think the main idea was to take it right back to the beginning. One of the things that I think helped him so much was using times tables. With him, it clicked. He still, even though we learned this years ago, he still says the stories when he's doing the math problems, just to make sure that he is on the right track. So that really clicked with him. And I think learning that base, that foundation, and then starting to build on that has really, really helped.
You know, that's a great point that you bring up, because when my children were in elementary school, I remember my daughter struggled with math immensely, and they would have us do those speed tests because they would say that would help her get faster. Well, it doesn't help someone who has dyslexia or dyscalculia, because they need to be taught in a way that they can remember the numbers. And it just multiplication doesn't make sense to most people with dyslexia or dyscalculia. And that's why the stories are so helpful. I sometimes, and I was pretty good with multiplication, but sometimes I will see the stories in my mind to help me, because it's quicker than me trying to remember the math problem. So that's a great example.
I 100% agree. I had no problems, just like you, with multiplication. I still use the stories now just because it's quick for me. I always say math is not about speed. We don't need to be speeding through everything as fast as we possibly can, because sometimes we need to slow down and make sure things are right and correct. So that whole idea of going back to the building that's on my mind right now is, you ever heard the saying, measure twice, cut once? Because if we speed through that, we're going to end up doing the same thing over and over and over again. We're going to be cutting that same piece of wood 5 times. And same with math. If we speed through that foundation, we're just going to be trying to reteach ourselves those harder areas over and over and over again, but not having that base of what you need to be able to learn those new areas.
That is so true. And there are so many times when I have had to tell my husband to measure twice so that next time he would only have to cut once. So in like the real life deal, it's very true as well. And so you shared about times tables. Are there any other tools or activities or resources that you find particularly effective in teaching math concepts?
I think one of the best is also touch point math. It brings the idea of math from your head to the paper, is how I like to think about it. Because if I am trying to add, and I am adding on my fingers, and I'm doing 2 + 5, all of my math work is staying right in this area, right? I'm doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? But with touch point math, I'm putting it on the paper. I am physically doing something to show how that problem is done. And it can be used in every area of math. I've used it in adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, fractions. All areas can use that touch point math. And if you have that foundation, you can solve a whole bunch of different problems. So I always start with touch point math. Every once in a while, I'll have a student that touch point math is not the best route for them. But that's what's great about having a one-on-one situation, is I can adjust to help that student. So number lines is another way I've been able to direct the math to the paper, but still be multisensory. So I use number lines and touch point, times tails. I love using, like, for fractions, pie charts or blocks to see how fractions are equivalent or not equivalent. And those are like my main ones that I use. I obviously use a bunch of others depending on the area of math, but those are the ones I use with every single student.
One of the really nice things about touchpoint math too is that a lot of times our students will come to us and they're like 12 years old and they're embarrassed that they still have to count on their fingers. And so the touchpoint is great because now they've transferred it onto the paper and other people can't tell that they need something to help them add up the numbers. So
100%. I agree with that completely. My older students, I think, use it even more than my younger students do.
And how long do you feel like it takes them to pick up remembering where the dots go?
I say it takes one lesson, 30 minutes, and they usually have it down. I always tell them, you don't have to try and memorize it. We're just going to go through each number. We're going to count it out loud. Connecting that voice to the picture really helps them memorize it without having to sit there with like flashcards or anything like that. I say one lesson, they usually have it down. And then the second lesson coming back a few days later is just to solidify what they've already learned. But it is very fast for the students to pick up where those dots go.
Yeah. And the touch point is, what I was going to say, I lost something again. Jeez Louise. Okay. You mentioned about when they come back a few days later, sometimes parents want to just do math one day a week. Can you address that?
Any amount of time will help. But the problem is if they only want to do one day a week, is that we learn something one week. And then the next week they come back, we spend probably 3/4 of the time reviewing that one thing that we learned last week because they've had so long between each session. 7 days is a long time to try to remember something from one week to the next. If there's that one extra session, the amount that they encode is so much greater from that session before that instead of spending 3/4 of the time reviewing that past topic, we'll probably only spend 1/4 of the time reviewing the past topic before moving on. So yes, that one day a week is going to help, but 2 days a week helps exponentially when it comes to math.
Awesome. Thank you. And I meant to mention when we were talking about the touchpoint math, that is something that I have created and we can share it with you. If you would like to receive the page, just comment below. Please share it with me. Touchpoint, just say touchpoint page and we can get that to you so that you can start using that with your child. And it really does make a difference. And when I was teaching math, it only took about one lesson for me as well. So that's pretty much the standard, which it's great for our kids who often struggle to learn a lot of things to be able to learn something in just one quick 30-minute lesson.
It is a huge confidence boost right at the beginning. I think it sets up the child for tutoring so well.
Yes. I'm thinking about a student that you had pre-COVID who was so nervous about math, and within 1 month he did the touch point and the times tails with you, and he was a brand new person. Do you remember that?
Yes, for sure. It didn't take long at all. That confidence grew so much. The nervousness went down. It was crazy, but I see that a lot with my students is getting that touch point and that times tails, which goes really quickly for a majority of my students. That confidence is just helps so much because they don't mind doing the harder stuff because they know that they can get it. Because a lot of times they struggle with just even beginning because they have a fear of failing. But now that they know that they can succeed, they try harder and they do so much better.
And what are some other things you do to build the confidence of your students?
I always say that there is no problem with getting something wrong. There is nothing bad that's going to happen. I don't point at something and say, you got it wrong. I say, let's see how we can fix this. So it's definitely a way of talking to them too, that getting a problem wrong is not the end of the world. Nothing bad is going to happen because of it. And really working on the step-by-steps. So we applaud the success of the small things. We make a big deal about getting that first step done. Because I say, look at how much of the problem you just did perfectly. We don't worry about the one small mistake at the very end. We focus on look at how much you just did and look at how great you're doing. So really focusing on the pluses rather than the minuses really helps to build that confidence.
That's great. And I think sometimes as parents, it's harder to focus on the pluses because we're with our kids so much, we get frustrated, and it's nice to have someone who's not personally connected to that person to really build up their self-esteem and make them feel better. Wouldn't you agree?
I 100% agree. That outside praise sometimes feels way better than, just trying to focus on that problem getting right. Because like in school, you have a worksheet, right? You do problem 1, you either get +1 or nothing, right? So there's no like, oh, but look at how great you did. When we're doing one-on-one, I can point out all those small things. A parent has 50 other things that they have to deal with at that moment too. They don't have the focus on rewarding those smaller achievements. I use on our Qualigo system, there's confetti and there's stars and stuff. So the way I use it is that the confetti is for every positive thing that happened. So it doesn't have to be getting this section right. It could be one piece, they get a confetti. For every 5 confettis, they get a star. So they really get to see how they're growing each time. And they love to be like, I got 15 confettis today, or I got 20 confettis today. I see, look at how much you did and how well you did. And they really seem to enjoy that, actually seeing how much that they are growing and doing in each lesson.
That's great. So what about Common Core? Our kids tend to be very overwhelmed by Common Core because it's like too much, it's information overload. How do you help them? Because we don't teach Common Core. How do you help them through our programs that we use to be successful doing Common Core in school?
I hear this from a lot of, especially my older students. They're like, I am being taught math in school and I do not understand what they're doing. I hear this a lot. They're like, why can't it just be like this? Or why does it have to be like that? And what I like to do is I like to take that step back, figure out what it is they're having a problem with that Common Core. So a lot of times it's like, you have to do something this way, or you have to do something this way, and we have to learn this specific thing, right? But what I like to do is find maybe another way to solve that same problem in a way that works for them. Because one way that works for one student is not going to work for the next student.
Which is the point of Common Core, but it's just because of the way it's set up, it's too much.
They give every single way right up front, right? They Common Core, what a lot of times they're like, they give them 5 different ways to solve the same problem, and they want them to do all 5 different ways and learn all 5 different ways, right? But what I like to do is focus on the way that works for them. Because if they're trying to learn to do the problem 6 different ways, they're going to get confused with each method. But finding that method, I think, is the key. Finding the method that works for them is key.
Yeah. Okay, now let's talk about some advice for parents. What strategies do you recommend to keep students engaged and enthusiastic about learning math at home?
So I think one of the main things you can do with your student at home is kind of integrate math in everything that you're doing at home. Not necessarily sit the child down every day and have them do these 5 problems, but when you're cooking and you're wanting to split a recipe in half, have your child help you split that recipe in half. See how much there's a cup of flour in the original recipe. Ask them how much half of the recipe would be. Or if you're at the store, let them count out the money. Let them see how much things are and figure out which thing would be the best price. Do I get the bigger thing that's 16 ounces, or do I get the smaller one that's 8 ounces? Which one is the better price per ounce? So doing things just in your everyday life, just integrating math. You have 6 apples in the bowl. You ask them, I have 6 apples. I need 10 apples. How many more do I need? Just let them do math with you instead of having them sit down and do math problems every single day from a worksheet.
That's great. I never thought of, when I go shopping, I always look and see which is more economical based on how big the box is, but I never thought to have my children do that. And when you were sharing, I was thinking, I just brought home apples today and most of the apples are bruised. And someone can have their child count how many of the apples are bruised and how many are not bruised, and then add together how many apples there are total. I shop at Trader Joe's, so I'm planning on taking those apples back because I think there's 8 apples and like 6 of them are bruised.
I would take those back.
But yeah, that's a great way to let them help out and keep them busy and out of your hair while you're putting away the groceries.
Yeah, a lot of my students and children in general want to be a part of what their parents are doing. And so letting them be a part in a way that also helps with their math or reinforces math that they've been doing, I think is a great way to have them practice their math at home.
What practical advice would you give parents to support their child's math learning at home, considering different stages such as early math skills, elementary, middle school, and high school levels?
Let's say you have an elementary school student and you are building a Lego tower and you say you want 25 Legos in that tower, and you want, we'll do fractions here. We want 1/5 of those Legos to be green. How many green Legos should you have in that 25 tall piece Lego tower? And so you can break it up like that. Get a little bit older. Then you can start, like I said, at the grocery store, figuring out price per ounce. That division, working with decimals, is a way you can figure out price per ounce. Then you can go even higher up with geometry, building a box or a table, and you tell them to use a protractor to get that 90-degree angle. And so, but there is ways to integrate math in everything. Hanging a picture on a wall, finding the center point of a wall uses fractions. We see math in everything that we do. It's just recognizing that we already do it and having your child do it with you. I think it's a great way to integrate math at home.
Awesome. Thank you for those tips. Do you have any final advice for parents?
So I have 2 pieces of advice. First being, if your child needs help, don't stress about getting them help. It's not like you have done anything wrong. There's anything maybe that you need to change at home. They just may need more assistance in that area of math or in the foundations of math. And so you don't have to stress yourself out. Feel free to reach out, get help for your student, because the best thing you can do is advocate for your child. And number 2 is integrate math into what you're doing already at home. Like I said, with the building blocks, the grocery store, money, telling time on a clock, all of those things you can do at home with your child without having to focus on, I need my child to learn this, and this. Take it back, take a step back, do the basics. Let your child have fun with math at home. And that will help in all other areas of math as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel. And Rachel is available to help with tutoring. So if you do want to reach out, we can schedule a consultation, and then Rachel will do the onboarding evaluation to help determine what your child knows and needs help with.
I would love to help any student. I can help in anywhere from basic math, geometry, algebra 2, anything that your child needs. We are here to help you.
Thanks.